Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe for those out there on YouTube watching this, and everybody in podcast land. Make sure to rate 5 stars. We continue to raise money for the Thorn organization that helps fight against human trafficking. So for every 5-star rating that we get in Apple Podcasts, I will donate an additional $1 on top of the 20% of what this show makes going over there. So thanks again for listening, for everything that everybody out there. Thank you guys so much for listening. But today, also actually real quick, if those looking and seeing my shirt right now, the Chicago Beers, you can get that out there on the merch store. It's only $20. So for those listening, you can just see the link out there. There's a lot of awesome merch out there for you, and only $20, a steal of a deal for a lot of this stuff. But today we have a special show. Today we got Skokes here, we got Sam I Am in the chat, and we have Parker Ainsworth, a Houston beat writer for Belly Up Sports. And how you doing, Parker?
Well, when you introduce me as a Houston beat writer, I think, people think of like, oh, the Rockets not great, the Texans not great, the Astros, we got the Astros, we're doing it right. So I'll say somewhere in the middle there. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Can't complain. So what else do you do for, I know Belly Up, you do a whole bunch of stuff. So where can they kind of like follow you out there, and what other things that you have going on?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is at Painsworth512, Parker Ainsworth, Painsworth512. I do writing primarily on basketball. I head up the basketball department at Belly Up Sports. I also, like I said, cover Houston and those kinds of things. I have a podcast called F in Sports. I'm a teacher by day, so the shtick is we're grading sports topics and giving multiple choice questions. And every week we hand out gold stars and detentions in the NFL and those kinds of things. I post all that stuff on Twitter, so I would just say find me on Twitter at Painsworth512, and it'll pop up along with like losses on the Sneakers app and other things that go through Twitter.
Nice. I love it. And also a great follow on Twitter. So I posted that out in the chat so people can click on that. Awesome follow. Just amazing questions that you post out there, and just a lot of interactions going on. So definitely a must follow for everyone who just loves sports. It's really interesting, the stuff that you post out there.
Thank you. Sometimes it's like sports adjacent. we'll call it good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best stuff. But the reason why Parker's joining us today, so we have the Houston Texans. We are on to Green Bay. I mean, not Green Bay. Sorry. I see Sam I Am saying FGB right in the chat. So I was like, I'm getting that out of my mind. We are on to Houston officially, and hopefully it's better for us. But wanted to bring an expert in on the Houston Texans just to kind of break this down, because I know a lot of us, we might not know much about the Houston Texans. So honestly, this is the Lovie Smith revenge game. Is this going to be, Parker? I guess how is Lovie doing in his home state of Texas?
Honestly, I think that probably is one of the storylines people want to tie in, because he did have, there were ups and downs, but he had a big run there in Chicago. I think that's interesting is that it feels like in Houston, Lovie's kind of become this like waiting duck, sitting duck, because something is going to be coming down the road whenever this team does, if they get a top 3-5 pick this year and they get a Stroud or get a, Bryce Young or whoever, then they will probably find a coach that suits that style more. If they win a couple more games and it's more like a 9-10 pick, then, theoretically you hope to work towards one of those kinds of guys later. But in the meantime, you hope that Lovie Smith instills some of those like old school football. He's been around the game a long time. He head coached a number of different, mentioned Chicago and University of Illinois and so on, and still those kinds of things in a relatively young team. I don't know how many if your listeners are primarily Bears fans, I don't know how many of your guys will know our guys outside of like Brandon Cooks and Rex Burkhead's been in the league a little while, but outside of like those kind of names, I don't know what kind of names stick out across non-Houstonians or non-Texans, right? So there will be names you see on Sunday making, plays, air quotes, because the degree that Houston Texans will make some plays that you probably won't have heard before. And that's who we roll with.
I mean, I'm looking at the roster right now and I'm like, I follow the NFL. I follow the draft, and a lot of these guys, I'm like, ooh, like some of these players. But I'm looking at some of their grades, and I watched some of the defense, and they played pretty well. But we also have a question in the chat. So as a Texans fan, do you hate the Packers? 1 is yes, and 2 is yes again.
So my Packers thing actually goes, a college buddy. I played at a small liberal arts school out in Los Angeles, and a college buddy of mine was a big Packers fan. Yeah. We were teammates. I played on the defensive line. He played the offensive line. And so I hate the Packers for that reason. So it has nothing to do with being a Texans fan. I was just tired of having to deal with his Packers crap all the time. So that's my answer to that.
I like it. So also too, I guess, just how has the Texans season been? Because it seems like they were at least competitive in some games. Is there some optimism, or is there just like, I don't know how we got close?
Well, I will say that it's weirdly like, assuming the tie doesn't knock you out of like I mentioned, a top quarterback sweepstakes, it almost feels like that's exactly the plan. Is like, you want to look competitive, look like you're having growth, but also don't win too many games because you want that, light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing to come to fruition sooner rather than later. That's not to say that they're going to necessarily throw the game on Sunday. I'm not saying we're handing it to you, but like the tie with Indianapolis week 1 was phenomenal. That was exactly like, we did not win, but we played Indianapolis close in the division, and frankly, got to embarrass them on TV. Right? That's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to do this year in the big picture.
Yeah, I agree. And also, we have another little post out here from Sam I Am Gaming. The Texans are one of the teams everyone wants to succeed. Honestly, yeah. Like, I mean, it might also be because I'm actually originally from Texas. I'm from the Austin area. So it's like they were the new team, and always like the new team is always kind of cool. I always feel like,
well, and there's certainly some like, Houston sat Deshaun Watson for a number of reasons, including a trade request. But then, like, is now they sat him amidst all of last season. And if there's any ill will towards him, there's certainly this feeling like, well, but Houston didn't play, right? Like, he hadn't been suspended yet when he was on the Texans. There were other things going on there too. And I don't mean to say like they had the moral high ground. Like, plenty of teams would like to start that guy at quarterback as far as an on the field product goes, but they certainly won some people over by going with Davis Mills last year. I don't know if Davis Mills is long-term or not, but he's who we got right now.
And it's kind of funny that the Texans are like a very well-liked team, and then you have the Houston Astros in baseball.
What happened there? Why would people not like?
I don't know. Let me just get my trash can out this time. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess, just like, speaking of just Texans fans, I guess, what is kind of the vibe going in here? I know there's not a lot of national love necessarily for the Bears, especially coming off of what happened to the Bears in week 2. Is kind of like the vibe in Houston that, like, this is an easy game, or this is a bounce back game, or what's kind of the vibe?
Well, honestly, I think all of teams like Houston, I about to say all of the bottom of the league, but when we saw Justin Fields play like that in week 1, like, the leadership aspect, obviously they played in the rain, the slop, and it didn't look great. But playing at like a leader in the rain in year 2, those kinds of things, I think Houston fans are like, that's why this is the plan, right? You get Justin Fields early in the draft, you get a guy. It was a great quarterback draft that year, but you get a guy like that early in the draft, and you theoretically have this like rookie contract window now that you can put a team around him in. Week 2, it didn't quite look like that. I don't necessarily feel like Houston is like scared in the sense that they're going to get embarrassed by the Bears. And I don't mean that to be negative to you and your viewers, but it's certainly not the scary kind of like Brian Urlacher Bears of when I was a kid, right? That's not the kind of team we're seeing this Sunday.
Totally.
And so that's, I think, probably somewhere in that range of like, we probably don't win, but I'm not worried we're going to get embarrassed and like, 49-0 or something like that on national TV.
Yeah, makes sense. So with this, though, going over to the Texans, is there a side of the ball that you think the Houston Texans are particularly stronger at, whether it's offense or defense?
Well, I think everyone and we mentioned in pre-pod about like everyone had their eyes on the running game because like Damien Pierce was a big fantasy pickup across the board. I don't know that I would say like the Texans offense is that kind of an offense, but they certainly have like eyes on them because of things like fantasy football, because guys are like, who, this out of nowhere running back. We seem to have those pop up all the time. They do have Brandon Cooks. He always has a hamstring issue, but otherwise he has some speed. I like Dario Kumbawale. I think he's probably at the last legs of his career. Wisconsin running backs tend to be guys that I like for whatever reason. They're like down, but there we go.
Yeah.
Pound the rock kind of guys. And so I think that's the kind of thing we could see here. I saw someone commented, I think it popped up, OJ Howard as well.
Yep.
It's not the prettiest offense by any stretch, but if Davis Mills can manage it, you're hoping for like a solid, like slow 21, no big plays, but capitalizing on good field position, kind of win that battle. I don't look at their schedule and see a bunch of wins. Brandon Cooks would make a lot of offenses better as long as he's moving around right. But the thing I think that's interesting is that as I look at this team, part of the reason you want a quarterback is you want to face the franchise kind of guy as well. You'd hope if you don't have that guy at quarterback, you have him somewhere. And I think whether or not it's successful or not, they want to hang it on Stingley, the guy they just drafted, right? They want to hang it on having a take the half the field away type of corner. And I think Stingley can get there. He hasn't shown anything he won't be able to get there. But the defense as a whole is certainly like, if he's taking away half the field, then there's a lot happening on the other half right now, right? Like people are not like, the defense is not shutting people down like that by any stretch. And so I think that's where the goal would be. It's why you bring in a guy like Lovie too, right?
Totally.
That's just not where we are right now.
Yeah. So kind of going back to just like the offense, you were talking about the running game. Is Pierce the guy? Do you really think moving forward? I have him and Brandon Cooks on my fantasy team, so I know that Cooks is good for 1,000. But do you really think that Pierce is going to be the guy, or do you think it's going to kind of be that continuous mix of just running backs all over the place?
Well, I think the reason, so from a fantasy perspective, if you're looking like a longevity, long-term kind of thing, the offensive line is not great. And so I think that the real trick will be is these guys are going to get hit a lot. And I don't know that I'd sit my chips on any one guy, not because it's necessarily by committee. I like watching Pierce run. We had a commenter a second ago say something about watching Brandon Cooks as well. They're going to get a lot of hits because they're going to be hits from like defensive linemen. These are not like safeties and corners. These are big 350-pound guys hitting our guys, at the line of scrimmage, maybe yard in the backfield. And Pierce will put up yards. We've seen the fantasy stats, whatever. Even in a 16-9 loss against the Broncos, he was like, he had moments, right? 16-9, first of all, tells you where the offense at. But the truth is that I think that's the deal, is like they're going to have a lot of running backs over the course of the year because the wear and tear on Texans running backs is just going to be brutal. Mills is going to need to hand it off some. He's not a guy that can sling it 60 times a game, 50 times a game. And they don't have anyone to block for those guys.
So a little bit on that, the blocking, I guess, just where is the weakness? Is it pretty much all over except for Tunsil, or where do you see this offensive line?
Well, and Tunsil himself is boom or bust, right? He is like, he'll get 4 penalties 1 week and he'll put up a PFF rating of something in the 90s, right? Then he is tremendous at certain spots. And then some weeks he just has a bad week with the wrong pass rusher. I tend to think it's our guard, center guard, interior spots. I don't mind Titus Howard on the opposite side either for a right tackle. But the interior stuff, which again, when you talk about the running back kind of things, is really, really porous. It's hard to be super critical of guys that are playing that football, but they're just not starting caliber guys. They're on a good team. They're rotating in maybe like as the third or fourth guy, or when someone breaks shoelace to come in, and they're not. We're relying on guys like Kenyon Green very, very heavily.
Yeah. So this is another week that this is the third week in a row I feel that the Bears have gone against a offensive line that's weak in the middle, but kind of strong at tackle, because they had the Packers last week and then they had the 49ers the week before that. So do they typically like to run it more outside then with kind of the tackles? Because that's been kind of the story and a big weakness of the Bears running defenses when people start running it outside of the tackles. Is that really what they do, or is it more of like an inside type of running game? Do you know?
So admittedly, I think it's early enough in the season that we can look at, like, is it necessary? Like, Pep Hamilton's the OC. Like, is it what he wants to do or what they can do? And like, where does that go over the course of the season? The whole staff's new. When I think of Lovie Smith teams, and Hamilton was a pick by Lovie, so I think that that's worth pointing out. I tend to think of that being more of a between the tackles kind of team. And maybe that's why they're not having a lot of success. But I guess I don't want to speak too much on what Hamilton does because I don't have a lot of like where he's going to go with this kind of thing. I mean, he was an OC in Indiana or Indianapolis in like 13, 14, 15, if I'm looking at this right. And has otherwise been like more or less a position coach with mostly quarterback work. So
yep.
We have him as OC. I'm kind of figuring out more about where that's going to look and go. But they've been sticking between the tackles, and I think that's the rough-nosed Lovie side. I don't know if that's because of what Hamilton wants or if that's really where they're going to go.
Yeah, it seems like he hasn't really changed since the Bears days, where it's like he's kind of kept the same thing, kept the same groove. But I know that us Bears fans, I know myself, I root for Lovie just because it's like, it's Lovie. I want to see him do well. I know that he's a Texas person, so it's like, it's nice to see him back home. But you've talked a little bit about Davis Mills. Is Davis Mills someone to be on the lookout for? Do you think that he's the guy, or do you think he's going to be like, he's just the stopgap, so don't put much stock into him this year?
So I think he's a stopgap, but not because he's not talented enough. And I say that mostly because Stanford quarterbacks, we know they're smart. I know obviously Andrew Luck is like super outlier, but like Davis Mills is a Stanford quarterback. We know he's a smart kid. He's every bit of the build, 6'4", 225, etc. Right? Strong arm, not like the 60, 70 yards, but like strong arm. The interesting thing to me is that like, so across the league, you got like in Miami, they're having their offensive weekend they just had, but all of the season prior, they were like, is two of the guys, right? Like, and they had Waddle, and they add Tyreek Hill speed, and they change OCs, and it looks like, oh, he might be the guy. I think the interesting thing in Houston will be the change will happen at quarterback before Davis ever gets those skill options, right? Like and he'll probably end up turning into a career backup because he's good enough to be on rosters. I don't mean that. I think that the change they'll make quickly will be the, face of the franchise type of young, exciting quarterback next season. Like we saw Bryce Young avoiding tackles and stuff like that all last year and this year in the Texas game for like he had the big one down the stretch. Yeah. And bluntly, we're talking about Texas offensive line woes. They need that. they need someone who can make one or two guys in the box miss before letting it fly downfield. They need someone with some excitement. And so I feel like Davis Mills will get replaced, not necessarily because he can't be the game manager. Whoever is typing in keeps feeding me things great, like Heineke.
Yeah, totally.
Heineke won a playoff game. Like, you can win games with those guys. I think Davis Mills can totally be that. I just don't think that they're going to give him that kind of chance. Like, they're not going to put pieces around Mills. They're going to go get someone else.
Yeah, and especially if you're drafting high too. It's you don't have a lot invested in them. And then to your point too that you made earlier, they have a brand new head coach, brand new everything. That person's going to want his guy. He's going to want his quarterback. He doesn't want to be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go defensive lineman with this first pick in the draft, or top 5 pick in the draft.
Well, and y'all are Chicago people. Lovie has certainly won with game managing type of quarterback play. Like, it's not like he has to have Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers to win football games. Like, he can make it work. It's because of defense and things like that, defense and running games and all of that. But he's not averse to it. I just don't think the organization is going to go that way.
Yeah, Rex was his quarterback. That was his famous quote, is just, Rex is our quarterback. So I wasn't surprised when Rex was his running back as well, because I'm like, I should have saw it coming. Should have seen that. But like Heineke reminds me of Mills, but also like a Gardner Minshew, where it's kind of that solid level quarterback, but nothing too crazy. But going over to this defensive side of the football, this Bears offensive line has always been kind of the talk. Or right or wrong, it's always, no matter what happens, it's always about the offensive line. Is there anybody that you feel on this defensive line that would potentially give the Bears some troubles?
I think like they've got I always say this guy's name's wrong. It's Okoronkwo. He like puts pressure on the quarterback. He's like he's not quite your classic edge rusher type. He's 6'1", 250, which is not quite the long, bend it around kind of guy. He's also not like the 4'5" kind of guy. I guess if he walked in a room, he'd probably look more like Dwight Freeney, but he's far less talented than Dwight Freeney. Anyway, I think he'd be the guy if I were like needed to put money in Vegas on who's getting a sack. I'd probably say it's him, but the truth will be is that I don't know that the Texans put a lot of pressure. It did get a week one. I don't know how much pressure they really put on the Bears, unless you're lower on their offensive line than I am on the Texans defensive front seven. Just because I don't know, maybe it was because I just saw Denver lose to Seattle, and so I don't think very highly of what Denver's doing.
Yep.
But we didn't exactly put a lot of pressure on Russell Wilson and what's going on in Denver. And I have to say that, frankly, Denver had a lot of self-inflicted wounds across that game, and that's a separate podcast for a separate time. But
yeah,
it wasn't a whole lot of things that we were doing. It was things that it felt like they were doing wrong, and we benefited from. We kept it close for a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, Obo, I was a big fan of him coming out of college. I remember that. I think it was like Oklahoma, and yeah, I just remember, not the right size, like you were saying, 6'1", but still good production. But yeah, like we saw in the chat too, maybe like a Jerry Hughes, the ageless wonder. Seems like he's. I have to pull this up. Okay, he's 34. I thought that he was going to be like 36, 37 or so. So not as old as I thought. But one thing that I don't know if it's just because it's the highlights that I watch of the Texans, but does this team kind of turn the ball over? Like, is there, like, you kind of touched base a little bit on Stingley Jr. Is there anybody that we should be worried about, whether it's turning the football over or just like in pass coverage?
So I would have thought Stingley would have a more slow to adjust kind of season. I think that we're young, and I think what's nice to see about that and being young between Stingley and Petrie is that, frankly, as a Bears guy, you might feel almost lucky in December that you caught us week 3 because this is Stingley's third NFL game, right? This is Petrie's, his third NFL? I don't think he's also early in his season as well. And I think that if you're looking at those guys, I think I have faith that they will be good, especially Stingley. I think that they will be good. I liked him a lot at school. I might have taken Sauce Gardner, but it wasn't up to me. I look at that and think like that will happen. Do I think that happens the first week? No, especially if I'm thinking of like Justin Fields is in year 2. He's seen a season worth of NFL defenses, and he's seen, frankly, some pretty good ones across the board. And so I don't know. I think that I could see it happening. I just would predict it happens later in the season. So in week 3, I don't think I wouldn't anticipate the Texans turning the Bears over a lot at this point in the year.
That's a good point, because also I was super high on Jalen Petrie coming out. I was jealous that you guys got him, and I think he's been looking solid, and it's kind of a new position for him too, right, at safety, because he was more of that slot in college.
Yeah, and so Houston's putting them both in and out of the box, that was interesting. Okay. And I guess the slot in a college offenses are so spread out. So I guess the slot guy is relatively close to the box, but I would have thought it translates to more of an out of the box safety or a deep guy, and he's doing a little bit of both. And anyway, we'll see where they go with it long term. I don't think it's fair to put any 23-year-old kid into like a box as far as that kind of stuff goes. But it's certainly stuff that I'm optimistic about. I'm just not necessarily optimistic about like this week, right? Like, while Justin Fields is not, 2009 Tom Brady, he's also like, he's more experienced guy for sure.
Yeah, that's good. So if you were the Bears offense, how would you attack it? Because would you try and attack in the air, or would you think that they're more susceptible on the run and just keep the run game going? How would you attack this defense?
Oh, I would put not to use like I feel like the RPO phrase has gotten to be like so cliche.
Oh
It's
yeah.
almost but I would put the options in the field's hand, right? You're probably also trying to evaluate as you're a coaching staff going forward, and this is a good week to do those kinds of things. But B, I think the deal there is that you're making a defense that is either young or old or slow. You're
Yeah.
making them wrong, right? And so that seems to be young, old, or slow. There's no middle guys, no prime their career guys. I think that's kind of I would coach it as that's the focus. It's like, okay, we're putting it into an RPO, simple reads, but if this, then that, if that, then this, 2 route combinations on the rollout side or whatever. And just trust Fields to make the right decision. And frankly, I don't mean to like belittle the Bears, but if he can't make the right decisions, it might be a problem, right? Like it might be a big time problem.
Fair. Oh, it's definitely fair because I know friend of the show, Clay Harbor, he posted something and that he rewatched the all 22 of the Bears game, and he's like, I don't know how to say this, Bears fans, but yet again, this is one person watching all 22, but he's a former NFL player. He did say, he's like, there was wide receivers open. Fields just needs to speed up his processing. Cause like to your point, Parker, that quick decision making, with like the RPOs could be really beneficial just to get the ball out, get it going. And yeah, then we'll see what this team does. But I guess overall though, is there anybody that you haven't mentioned that you want to shed some light on that maybe somebody has no idea who the heck they are on this Texans team?
Well, there's plenty of people I feel like come this Sunday that no one knows who the heck they are. We mentioned Petrie, I guess. I think he gets in the Houston circles, does get left off, not because he's not going to be really good, but because the hype around the young DB has been to this point stingly. And so like you have to go like through the layers of the onion to kind of get to that in the city of Houston. I want to say like we'll have a Rex Burkhead resurgence or something, but he is all of 32 years old. I'm 31 now myself. It's not very often that I'm like talking about guys older than me, and that's where we're at these days.
Dude, I feel I feel you. Like you wake up and your knees are sore, and you're like, dude, I don't know how it is going to be if you're Rex Burkhead there.
If my knees are sore, if you're playing pickup on Sunday and it's Tuesday, I don't know how he's going to take handoffs in an NFL game. But I digress. I think the interesting thing, and maybe we can talk about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at least in Slack or on Twitter or something. But after the fact, does anyone jump off the field to you? Because frankly, I'm pessimistic. Maybe that's part of it, but I'm pessimistic about my sports teams. I mean, look at my Rockets and the Astros. It's all gone downhill since some trash cans. But when I look at the Texans, I don't see on the offense side of the ball a lot of fun and flash. I think Damien Pierce will get fantasy numbers because someone's got to touch the rock, right? And then on defense, it's like I said, I see some youth and some age, and that there's no middle in that, and I worry about that in a broad strokes kind of system. Or in like broad strokes, I do worry about that in the system with the first year coach. I mean, Lovie's got a long track record of coaching, but you also have to like lead a group of 55 men out there to play, and it's his third time doing this group. There's not like that appeal either.
Yeah, and last little question before we get into some game predictions. I know that we know Brandon Cooks. We've Skokes in the chat mentioned OJ Howard. Is there any other wide receiver to worry about, like a Nico Collins or Moore? I got to look at his first name. Chris Moore, never heard of him. Like, no offense.
There's a couple of those. Nico Collins is, I think, if I'm like, I would say he's probably got the second most targets. Am I right there?
Probably.
With Brandon Cooks, but yeah. Okay, so Nico Collins got the second most targets. So if you're looking for like a Texans guy, if you're back to fantasy stuff. If you're looking for like, if they double Cooks, who gets the touchdowns? I guess the next guy on the depth chart there would probably be Nico Cooks. And, we talk about get off the bus kind of guys. Not that that's a big deal in the NFL like it is in like high school football or something, but he is 6'4", 215, goes, 4.4, 4.5. Like, he has built the part in every way. I assume when I see those kinds of things and a guy that drops to, a late pick and those kinds of, like, I assume a 3rd round pick for wide receiver, I guess, isn't horribly late.
Just still, yeah.
Anyway, for a team that didn't draft a quarterback, I feel like he's probably got some route running things that I don't know about. I am not so bluntly, my playing career, I mentioned I played line. I trust what I read about those kind of things. I haven't read one way or the other, but I will say a guy that's got a handful of targets and was a 3rd round pick, and it looks like that probably has something going on in those areas. And so does he put it together on a fade ball over the top or with one-on-one coverage because the Chicago defense shifts over? Can he get you a fancy touchdown? Absolutely. And that would probably be, and then OJ Howard, someone says the tight end. I think we said his name 12 times because it came up, but that would probably be my next guy as far as someone to have an eye on for that kind of stuff. But I also would not pick a lot of Texans on my fantasy team. So,
so that's good to know, at least, like, Collins, big size receiver out there. Like, maybe they use just someone to be on the lookout for. It's good to just understand some of the weapons that they have. So Parker, the last and final thing, the final score and prediction. So your final score and just who you think is going to be the player of the game. So what are you feeling?
So I'm thinking we're both teams below 30. So I'm thinking probably like a 27 and I'll say 14. Make it, was that, I don't know what the line is actually set at right now, but I'll say 27-14 Bears. I would imagine if they go to the RPO kind of stuff that I think will put Houston in trouble, that will mean a Justin Fields type of fun game, right? 27 could be, 3 touchdowns or maybe even, 4 and a mixed extra point when they're going for 2 at some point or something like that, right? So I could see him having a big day with like 2 in the air, 1 on the ground. If that's because I think that's how a guy like him, young, easy decisions, beats a team like Houston because they'll make plenty of their own mistakes. And it's hard to not. I mean, I know giving the game ball to the quarterback super easy.
Yeah.
but in an RPO kind of situation, he's really making the plays, and I think that's the way to go with that. I don't think, like I said, 27-14. I don't know if either team is exactly lighting up the scoreboard. I don't know what the over under is on things like DraftKings and stuff like that, but or what the sportsbook line is. But I would imagine this one stays below whatever that put it at, not quite 40 or just 41. So
yeah, and I see that they're giving the Bears the market is -3 for the Bears, but I don't have the overall total. But yeah, I feel you there with like giving the game ball to Fields though too, because it seems like everything hinges on on Fields too. Like it's if he all of a sudden throws for 250 to 300, yeah, he's definitely going to be the player of the game. But Parker, thanks for hopping on and talking some Houston Texans, because this is a great way to just kind of prep for it. So for those watching out there, make sure to like and subscribe. And also, we're going to be previewing the full game with Johnny PayPal on Thursday, and then on Saturday morning for YouTube members only, you can join the live chat. Otherwise, you can just wait for it to be posted right after. But we're going to have Kenneth Davis from NBC Sports Chicago on, and you can ask him any questions that you want, and it'll be kind of that live stuff. But Parker, before I let you go, where can people follow you out there?
Again, you can find me at Ainsworth512 on Twitter and Instagram. I record a multiple time a week, it's usually 2 or 3 times a week show called Effin' Sports. We grade podcasts, or we grade things like a sports podcast. And then I write for bellyupsports.com. I'll be sharing that kind of stuff throughout my Twitter. I'm head of the basketball department, so I also say go enjoy the basketball department as we get ready for NBA season. And we're just wrapped up the WNBA season. We're approaching college basketball and NBA basketball. Fun time and all that. And I'm sure I'll be tweeting during that Houston Texans game as well.
We'll definitely be in contact as that game is going on, and we'll see. But best of luck, and thanks again, Parker, and everyone on Bearable Sports Podcast. We're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.